Am I audible to everyone?
Yeah. Yes, Shanvi.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shanvi Tyagi, Secretary of GemTech Cyber Cell Committee and your moderator for this session. I feel extremely honored to welcome you all for today's session that is on artificial intelligence and privacy. This special guest lecture has been organized by GemTech Cyber Cell Committee that is headed by Professor Dr. Pallavi Gupta. Now, I would like to introduce you all to our guest for today's session, Mr. Puneet Bhatia, who will enlighten us with his words and wisdom. Sir is the founder and owner of Fit for Privacy, which helps CXOs and DPOs to reduce privacy risk without adding new staff. Their organization does this by working on creating a culture of privacy through definition of strategy, delivery of training for staff and management, and putting a governance system in place. He also offers programs that helps to prepare for IAPP certifications. Sir also hosts the Fit for Privacy podcast, and he is also the author of many books like Be Ready for GDPR, AI and Privacy, and many more. It is an honor to have you, sir. Now, before beginning with the session, I would request Professor Dr. N.K. Behel, sir, to give his warm greetings to everyone. Sir? Sir, are you there?
Ma'am. Yeah, I'm speaking.
Sir, I would request you to please.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Shanvi. What are you saying?
Sir, I would request you to please welcome everyone with your warm greetings.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Honorable Chairman Dr. Amit Gupta ji, Campus Director Dr. R.K. Raghuvanshi sir, Principal GemTech School of Law, Greater Noida, Dr. Pallavi Gupta ma'am, Faculty Coordinator Mrs. Prabha Sen ma'am, Student Coordinators my dear Varun Warrior, Dipanshi, Chaitanya Singh Gehlawat, and Shanvi, dear faculty members and students. I, Dr. N.K. Behel, Professor of Law at GemTech School of Law, Greater Noida, on behalf of GemTech family and on my own behalf, heartily welcome Honorable Puneet Bhatia, sir. It's my privilege to welcome you, sir, and we are really delighted to welcome you, sir. Puneet Bhatia, sir, is a leading privacy expert who has worked with professionals in over 30 countries. The main area of expertise of Bhatia sir is to identify and manage artificial intelligence and privacy risks. Sir has trained over 1,000 persons across various companies. He is a private advisor and coach for DPO and CPO also. Puneet sir has authored many books on privacy, and prominent amongst them are titled as Be Ready for GDPR and Artificial Intelligence and Privacy. Puneet sir is a global speaker who has spoken at over 30 global events, and sir is the host and founder of Fit for Privacy podcast. At the same time, we are happy to know that Puneet sir has a keen interest in academics, and he has contributed various articles which have been published in various journals, books, and prominent blogs. We once again welcome you, sir, to GemTech School of Law, Greater Noida, and we will invite you to our campus again once this pandemic of COVID over. And sir, we thank you so much for accepting our invitation, sparing time for our students and faculty members. Dear participants, today's topic, artificial intelligence and privacy, is a very interesting topic in today's contemporary world. You will be greatly benefited by today's deliberations. Bhatia sir, our students and faculty members are keen to listen you on today's interesting subject. You are once again welcome to the family of GEMS. Over to moderator Shanvi, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request Mr. Puneet Bhatia, sir, to please begin with the session.
Welcome, sir.
So much.
Welcome to
Can you hear
GIMS.
me? Namaskar. So thank you so much. I hope you all can hear me well and everything is audible.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for the kind words you have used. I mean, it's amazing and humbling. So thank you so much. Let me start by sharing my screen. But before that, let me give you some context. So when we talk about artificial intelligence and privacy, there are many dimensions in which we can talk about those. So we can talk about the law dimension, which you probably understand in this context, being in the law world. You have the organizational dimension, and then the technical dimension in which most people talk about AI and privacy. That is the data dimension, technology dimension, and that. But there's the another dimension in which we steer, we manage, and we organize privacy and AI in an organization. And I'm going to give you an insight into that perspective, because if I link it back to the story I had, so about 21 years ago, when I started with my journey, being an engineer, my perspective was everything is technical and that's where it ends. But then in a few years, I realized there's the project management perspective, legal perspective, and an umbrella policy perspective on how do you govern these things in an organization. It was enlightening. And that's something I'm going to bring to you. And as I bring to you, I would ask you to be engaging in the chat, because in a in-person conversation, it's very easy, as we said, very easy to understand what are you doing, because in this one, I don't see you, and then it's challenging. So use the chat function to share your comments, share things, and start by saying what one word comes to your mind when you think about data and privacy. As I share my screen, let's start with that in the chat. Fill in, all of you, what you think, the one word that comes to your mind, because that'll allow us to start the conversation. And every word is right. Let me assure you that. So use the word that comes to your mind, and I share my screen. I hope you see that as well. So give me a sign. Yeah, now somebody can speak if you can see my slides or the
Yes,
slide.
sir. Your screen is
Perfect.
visible.
Thank you so much for that. So as I said, I'll give you a management perspective, or how do you manage these things rather than getting into the technical side, so that you look at things from a slightly different perspective. That's my objective here. And I'm going to talk about AI, that is artificial intelligence, and privacy. That is another dimension. Most people look at AI as possibilities and privacy as restrictions. So it's not so black and white. We can find balance, not if we look into the law, not if we look into the technology, but if we look at it from a governance and management perspective. That's when you get a different perspective. And that's what I'm going to focus on, because most people will talk about AI and privacy are friends, that is, they work with each other, or they are foes, that is, they are against each other. And at that moment, we tend to get biased because we are looking at things as binary. But the truth is somewhere in the middle. That is, there's a balance to be found. We need AI, we need privacy, we need the laws, we need the government, and we need the corporates and the technology, everything together. But how do you have those things together? How do you find this balance? Because from a law perspective, sometimes we do this, don't do that. Technology, everything is possible. So we need to find that balance, and that balance is I'm going to talk about. But before that, let me thank a few people. First and foremost, I like to thank Professor Naresh for doing such a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much, sir. Then Shanvi doing the moderation, again, perfect. Then Ms. Palvi Gupta and Ms. Prabha Sen for helping us organize this and being part of this session, and Chaitanya, who made sure, I mean, there are many students, but very few have the courage to ask for a session and time and get connection. So he did that. So thank you, everyone. And all of you who are here listening to this session, because it's your time that I appreciate. Because everyone, we can give anything, but time is the most important thing. Because if you give me your 1 hour, it's gone. Then you can't get it back. You can't recover it. So my promise to you is, since you have given me that 1 hour, I will make sure that you get value out of it, worth out of it, and you learn about it from a different perspective, a perspective that you will find different, that you may find abstract. Some of you may find dry if you're looking at it from technical perspective. But the thing is, when things are different, that's when they are relevant, because they challenge you to think differently. Of course, sometimes we tend to think we don't need to think differently. But again, I let that choice on how you want to think to you, but I'll give you something different from a different perspective. So thank you so much for being here. And anyone who's listening to it as a recording, again, thank you for listening. And please continue to watch the recording as well if you're listening to the recording. By the way, just to make sure, because sometimes I get carried away, we have 1 hour and Q&A. That's what I understood.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll keep a tab of that. Good. So you already know who am I, so I don't need to say much about it because eloquent words have been used. One specific thing, I'm bringing the perspective from the practitioner side as well as the perspective from a learner side. So I'm a learner just like you all are, and I've had the good fortune of working in large companies like Stanley Black & Decker as global privacy manager, or ING Bank as a privacy and protection officer, as Sir said, across 30 countries. So I'm bringing to you how it works in large corporates, large organizations. How is privacy and AI organized in there? And that's why now I'm helping people through my company called Fit for Privacy. But it's not about me, it's about AI and privacy. And the question was, are these friends or are these foes? Do they align or do they fight? And as I said, that's not the way I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at how do we balance, and we all need to look at how do we balance. And we need to remember, as we say that, we need to remember that the privacy side is restrictive side that tells you what not to do and what to do and how to do. Now on the AI side, the technology side, there are no limitations and it can do whatever you tell it to do. Of course, the limitation is imagination. And to balance the two is a huge, huge challenge. So I'm going to share with you 5 different ways that I've also highlighted in my book, AI and Privacy, that we released recently, saying, how do you balance them? So 5 different ways in which you can balance them, 5 different ways. Wow. There's someone giving us music in the background. That's always interesting. By the way, that's not part of me, for sure.
Please remove that person out.
No, it's okay. I mean, I didn't mean to say anything against the person, but I didn't know the background music is also there. So that's always fun to have some humor in things. So thank you so much.
Apologies, sir. Apologies.
No worries. So 6 perspectives for a balanced view. That's the first thing I'm going to talk about. So as I was saying, we tend to look at things from a perspective, like legal perspective, financial perspective, technology perspective. But when we look at things from different perspectives, that's when we find the balance. Again, my assumption is all of you understand privacy and all of you understand AI. In short, privacy is about choices. Choices meaning, if I was to pick any one of you and I was to ask your name, you would happily share your name. If I was to ask your email, you would most likely share your email. But then if I ask you your bank account number, you would get suspicious. And then when I ask you your bank account password, you will certainly not share it, most of you, 99 or 99.9%. So what it is that we have certain limits, certain ways in which we choose what we share and who we share. Because if it was your partner, if it was girlfriend, wife, or maybe father or mother, you would have shared those things, all of those questions. But when I'm asking you, being new and not knowing you, you have a limit which comes in either at email stage or bank account stage, or certainly at password stage. That means we all have reservations on what we share and who we share it with. And that perspective, that choice, that freedom is privacy. So the freedom to choose what you share with who is privacy. And that is the challenging part, because each one of us has different limits. Now, to ensure that those limits are harmonized, standardized, consistent across the board, we usually have the data privacy laws. So that's how I see privacy in short. Of course, we can talk about it for days. The second dimension is we are talking about AI. So AI is a term which we've started to use recently in last few years or decades. But before that, it was automation, or it was computer, or it was software. I mean, it's the same, still the same thing. The things we as humans don't want to do or find them repetitive, we can save cost, we can save effort by letting technology do it for us. And that's artificial intelligence. And if we take it next step, that the technology can learn by itself, then it becomes machine learning. And if it can serve us, then we say data science, because we mine the data, look at the data to serve humanity. So if that's AI and that's privacy, what are the 6 perspectives we are saying to balance this view? The first and foremost is legal perspective. Because wherever you are operating, the first question to ask is, what do the laws say? Do the laws allow us to do things or not? That generally sets a good reference point or a boundary on what is possible in a project. So I'm taking a scenario. You're working in a corporate, large corporate, or you are a young startup, and you need to decide, is this project viable for us? The first perspective to look at is the legal perspective. What does the law say? The second perspective is the privacy perspective. Now, some of you will say, is that not defined by law? Yes and no. There are countries with privacy laws and there are countries that do not have privacy laws. So we need to think at it, is it in good interest from a privacy standpoint? Technically, we talk about cookies. So every website you go, there are cookies and they say, please accept. 90% of us just click it and find it an annoyance. A few percentile of us actually click and see what is being done. And few others even go in and make a judgment about the company. So if cookies is doing that, your data privacy collection or your projects also do that. When I talk to corporates, the key thing we talk about privacy is trust. And when I talk to students, then also we talk about is privacy helps establish trust. And yes, there are always some of you who say, well, I don't need privacy. And I respect your opinion. But I have participated in, by now, I think 40, 45 conferences, maybe 10,000 people. And I always give this challenge in every conference, because I know there are some of us who think privacy is dead and we don't need privacy. So any one of you who thinks privacy is dead and you don't need privacy, my email is in the last slide, or it's say hello@fitforprivacy.com. You are welcome to send me your name, bank account, password, and all the login credentials, because you don't need privacy. And I would love to have that because I like to explore. I've given this option to more than 10,000 people and I'm still to get one email. So either privacy is relevant or the other perspective, which you say needs to be a little bit fine-tuned. And I would say privacy is context specific. It's relevant at a certain point. It's not relevant at a certain point. Like I was giving you an example earlier, when your father, of course, that again in an Indian context, so or an Asian context, if your father is saying, give me your bank account password, you would most likely give it. Maybe in some other country context, you will not give it. So privacy is context specific, but you need to make those choices, and that choice, establishment of that choice is privacy. And we are in early stages of privacy. Like in 1960s or 50s, we were talking about equality and human rights. That's the journey we are on. There, some countries had taken control of our freedom, and now some companies have taken control of our privacy. And that's the battle we are fighting. Will we win? It's anybody's guess. So while you look at legal and privacy, the other dimension to look at is the human dimension. Now, that's not something we usually do in most projects, but it's very necessary. That is, does it serve human beings? The project we will have, will it serve human beings? Let's talk about the technology that we are having. So we are having mobile phones. Now, mobile phones have the capability to listen. Legally, we can always debate, is it allowed or not? But if the person has activated Google Voice or Apple Siri or whatever, so legally they have the consent. So privacy perspective, they have given an answer saying, yes, I'm okay. But now, if they keep the phone in the room, or the say bedroom, a little bit more intimate, and then do you want to hear out the conversation the husband and wife are having? Or maybe two people are fighting? Is that serving humanity? In my opinion, I don't think so. So these are the questions. And so looking at it from human perspective helps. And then comes the ethics perspective. Now, while the human or the moral perspective is a choice between good and bad, like we say, listening to somebody conversing is a bad thing, we should not do it. But ethics is a choice between good and good or bad and bad. So you have to choose one bad thing or one good thing. For example, we often use the example in AI saying there's an autonomous car, self-driving car is driving, and it sees two people. On one side, a 70-year-old, and on the other side, a 7-year-old. And the car determines by its algorithms that it must hit one. There's no other option. So how will you configure that car? To kill the 70-year-old or to kill the 7-year-old? Both choices are wrong. Of course, the smart ones will say we'll try to go between them and hopefully manage not to kill anyone or break, and all those things are possible. But the message here is you need to look at it things from an ethical perspective. And since we are in business, I cannot say, or we cannot say that monetary perspective is something we can let go. The business is there to make money. I've seen some of our privacy colleagues and they come into a company and say, well, your cookie approach is not aligned with the law. It's not privacy compliant. It's not legally compliant. Human wise, it's not good. And ethics, we don't need to worry because legal and privacy is already there. So please stop the website. Now, is that practical? No. Even though the site is non-compliant, there needs to be action to fix it because there is a monetary aspect. So things have to be looked at it from that perspective. And if you're launching a project, there needs to be a business case, a viable case. And then the societal dimension, because we were talking of an example in India versus here, like in the Netherlands, few months back, a grandmother posted her children or grandchildren's data or photos on her Facebook profile. Now, the situation was the family did not have very solid terms, and the grandchildren were annoyed that their personal photos have been posted on Facebook. They made a case and they won the case. The grandmother had to pay some money. Now, that's a societal thing that cannot be expected in Asian context. So you need to be aware of the project you are doing, where it is going to be launched, because there are legal influences, human influences, ethical, privacy, and more importantly, societal influences. So what may be applicable in one society may not be applicable in another. So now, how do you put this kind of a perspective? Because it's very challenging for one person to think from 6 dimensions. Of course, you can say, do 6 thinking hats and de bono thinking will help you. That's one way if you are a startup, but in a large corporate or a large organization, if you have the opportunity, the best way is set up a committee. Have 6 people representing 6 different perspectives: legal by legal counsel, privacy by the chief privacy officer or data protection officer, human perspective by the HR, ethics, your ethics counselor or ethics committee or head of ethics, monetary by the CFO, and the social, you need to pick up maybe unions representative or something like that. And when you do that, and then you'll have a coordinator of that committee called the AI and privacy committee or whatever committee you call it, you will have a reasonable view because everyone will focus on their perspective. The legal person will bring what legally is possible. The privacy person will say what privacy can do. The financial person will focus on the financial. That's how, because you cannot say we have the head of AI and he will look at the 6 or she will look at the 6 perspective. Yes, they can. Some people are superhuman, but we're not counting about superhuman and AI based people. We are looking at humans, and humans tend to be biased on one or the other perspective. So you need to bring in 6 different perspectives. And if in your culture, if in your organization, you believe there's another perspective which is relevant, maybe let's say retail perspective or a wholesale perspective, bring those people in. First thing, to have a look at things from a balance, look at things from different perspectives rather than one biased eye. And when you look at all of them, and more importantly, hear them out, give them the voice, and take consideration to that. So if you are in a hierarchical culture and saying CFO is the strongest, he's the C-level, all of us will listen, let's first listen to him and everyone will say, yes, sir, it will probably not work. So you need to give them equal voice. That's another thing. That's when the balance will come. So that's my first takeaway for you. A balanced perspective from 6 different views. So to allow you or allow my those who work with me, I usually have this Fit for Privacy podcast in which I bring in different perspectives, and I'm not sharing this because there's a podcast by me, but what I'm sharing is my learning on perspective and how this came up. So I've interviewed more than 30 people, of more than I think 50 now. So, and every time I talk about privacy, I ask them, how do you define privacy in one word? So that's one word, privacy, and I have 50 interpretations. Somebody says complexity, somebody says law, somebody says regulation, someone says risk, someone says possibilities, someone says talent search. So it is a perspective of seeing the same law differently that in my podcast people are able to say. And how about if we are doing a project and we bring 6 perspective, how much of enrichment we will have? So then the next thing is, now how do you balance decision making? Because if there are 6 perspective, who decides? Will the CFO decide because it's money matters? Of course, money matters, but does the legal person not get a decision point? So there's a 5A approach I like to share with you. That's my second takeaway. The 5A approach is awareness. First and foremost, let people know what you expect from them. What is your AI and privacy charter? By AI and privacy charter, meaning what is your vision or mission as a company? Like I was listening to Naveen Jain, and he says, our mission is to drill on the moon. Interesting. So if you want to drill on the moon, you need very different technology from AI and privacy perspective. But if your mission is to serve as a charity, your mission is going to be different. So have a vision or a mission and make people aware on what you expect and how do you expect them to help serve in that direction. Once they are aware, let them know, assign them the tasks saying what are their responsibilities. Like we were talking about 6 perspectives. So what do you expect from the legal person? And how can they contribute? So assign them a specific role. Then, as I mentioned, that there are different cultures, different ways of coming to decision making. So use a blend of things meaning give them an assessment questionnaire, 10 points on which they should assess the legal matters every time. That way it's more structured. Because if you get everyone into a meeting and saying legal, give your legal perspective, privacy, give your privacy perspective, based on the culture, the input may not be coming through. But if you let them assess it in a structured manner, you have more chances of getting the input. And once all those inputs are there, then the committee, then the meeting, there is an alignment on what everyone thinks, what was the assessment, and how do we as a team move forward. And when you do that, there is an agreement to say this project we will do or we will not do. And when you do that, you have greater chances of making a balanced decision making, because first you informed people what is expected, then you assigned a specific task, then you ask them to do an assessment from their standpoint, what is relevant in their context, and then you aligned together. And by assessing and aligning, you are making sure that the quantitative and qualitative both aspects are taken care. Assessments usually would be quantitative or generally rational, alignment would be more interpersonal, and then the agreement is likely to be more balanced. I hope so far so good, because I don't see any interaction in the chat. That means either I'm speaking very well or you're playing with your mobile phones. Either is fine as long as you are having a good time. So now, as we talked about what to do, the question is, before we get to exactly what are the steps, are there things that we should not do? Now, that's also sometimes very strange, because when I'm talking with people, I like to set the boundary. The best way of setting the boundary is to say what we will not do, eliminate the distractions, and then you can focus on what you need to do. So there are a few things in AI and privacy that you should not do to have success, because I firmly believe and guide people on belief that once you take care of the strategy elements, the management elements, the governance elements, the technology can take care. Technology can do what you want it to do, but you need to give clear instructions. So what do you not do? Now, AI and privacy have a lot of laws, lot of frameworks. All of them are good. In fact, I think it was Socrates or Aristotle who said, all models are wrong. And I can't challenge that, but I do understand that every model has some strengths, every framework has some strengths, and every model has some challenges. That's why I recommend not to look at one model, but look at multiple models, multiple frameworks, and make a perspective of what fits in your context. Like we said, look at the 6 perspectives. And as you do that, do not rely on decision making of single person, because one person has a probability, if you look at pure probability, 50% chance of going right and 50% chance of going wrong. But if we have 6 or 10 or 12 people involved, the probability of the decision going wrong is being reduced significantly. And that's what I'm advising. Then, if you rely on decision making of multiple people, that is a committee. The other thing is, don't rely on judgment. As I said, qualitative, quantitative, and rational inputs. If you put that in a committee, everybody has a discussion, the loudest voice would take care, usually. But if you have taken the approach of assessment, quantified, and then a discussion on those quantified facts, you would get to not a judgment, but a judgment based on facts, figures, emotions, and everything else. And then never ever underestimate the power of awareness, because you may think people know it, but people don't know it. Like, I have an assumption here in this presentation that you know AI and privacy. So I have assumed that you know AI and privacy and you are well versed with it. But if you don't know, this will all seem Chinese. So if you're doing that in a company as a project, And you assume that it's going to backfire because here, after 1 hour, we will be relieved, or you have an option of going out of the conversation. But in a project, that's very expensive. So set your expectations and make sure you do not underestimate awareness and knowledge gaps. Now, I know sometimes 6 perspectives, 5 A's, and all these things not to do seems like it's too much. Well, yes, it is too much, but don't fear failure. All these things are there to enable you to do the things in a right way. So certainly do something rather than getting into a fear of failure and saying, let's not do anything. We are likely to fail on the legal or the privacy or the human or the ethical or the monetary aspect. Yes, failure is always part of life, but we need to focus on what's in it and what can we win and how can we serve humanity, because there are always 2 sides. Because we are in an era wherein AI and privacy are both here to stay. And both can help each other. Like AI can serve privacy by detecting patterns, by detecting breaches, by detecting things beforehand and alerting us that this alert, this breach is likely to happen, or this vulnerability in the system is already there. So AI can assist in privacy. AI can help us move into protecting privacy. So it's not and or, it is together they help each other. And privacy help us do AI in a responsible manner. So if you're thinking it's too much, no, it's complex. Yes, it is, but it's complex for a reason. Because if you use AI in the right way, it serves humanity. But if you do it in a wrong way, then we are into Hollywood movies. That is, there's a robo, he has taken control, typical Hollywood movie theme. It has taken control, nobody can control it. That robo is unbeatable because it's self-learning, machine learning, and no one knows. So what do we need? We need some way to intervene and take human control, because that's not good for humanity. So it's responsible AI rather than pure AI. And the more you use AI, the more privacy we can ensure. And the more we use privacy, the more responsible AI will get. So it's a balance, but it's a perspective, not either or, it's and AI and privacy. How do I do my AI project in a privacy compliant way? Or how do I do my privacy with AI supporting me, assisting me, helping me get the data? Like one of the challenges we often have in context of privacy is to collect or make an inventory of data. So in Europe, you need to know what data you collect, what you do with it, where is it, which systems use it, and all that. So we call it the records of processing activity. In simple terms, let's call it inventory of data. So now making that inventory of data in a large organization working in 60 countries or operating in 60 countries with 600 systems and legal entities and so on, it's a nightmare. But if we can create an AI algorithm which kind of scans all data across system, across databases, across countries, gives us a snapshot saying, this is the data you have. We have leveraged AI to serve privacy. And those are the use cases we need to create. Those are the use cases we need so that we are leveraging both sides together. So that was my third takeaway. Don't do these 5 things, that is relying on one framework, making your decision making either with a single person or relying on judgments of people, making them aware, not assuming the knowledge gaps, or rather acknowledging the knowledge gaps and doing something. Now, oh, okay. I was expecting the slide to come in animation. Somehow it came all of a sudden. So that's what surprised me. But now I'm going to give you 10 principles which will allow you to balance the perspective. And these 10 principles are, I will go from left to right, top to bottom. So top row, because there are so many elements and somehow the animation didn't work. So like lawfulness to end, then for purpose limitation to end, and then the bottom part. I'll explain each one of these. So first principle for any successful project that you want to do with AI and privacy, because now we understand it's AI and privacy, not against each other, with each other. First and foremost principle is lawfulness. That is, whatever your algorithm will do, whatever your project will do, it has to be lawful. It has to be within the parameters of law. And if it's lawful, the next thing is we want to have the ability to exercise human control into that system. We talked about the example of Hollywood movie. The robo has taken control. We don't want that to happen in reality. So we want a possibility for human control. Another thing is, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old transparently, it's too complex. I know 5 years sounds a little bit too high a benchmark, maybe 7 or 10. But if you can't explain it to a kid, the project is too complex. So explain what it does. Like for data privacy, we can talk about n number of examples and definitions, and we'll still have doubts. But when we say, send me this thing, that's privacy, no, you get a message on privacy. So the third principle is transparency and explainability. Whatever you're going to do, tell your individuals whose data is being processed about what is being done, why it is being done, and what is the rationale, and how is it lawful, and how do they have control over it. Explain it in a simple, plain English language. It's not easy, it takes effort. The other aspect is time and storage limitation. That is, whatever data you are going to collect. I know data is food for AI. AI is data hungry. Data science needs data, but data should be like us humans. It has a birth and it has a death. That is starting point and an end point. It's not to be accumulated into your databases. So think about when it starts, when it ends, and what happens after that storage limitation has expired. What will happen to data when it's no longer needed? And that's something to factor in, to figure in into your data strategy. The purpose limitation. It means, let's imagine you go to a provider, and knowing a bit about India or a bit more about India, let's put it like that. Let's say you go to a provider, I will not name any provider, on buying a mobile SIM. You get that SIM and you are in a prepaid mode. Now you are browsing sites and you are doing whatever you want to do. Would you like that somebody is snooping in and checking in what websites you are watching, how much time you are watching? At least I won't like that. And that's called purpose limitation. I bought the mobile SIM so that I can surf data. Their objective was fulfilled when I paid them. And unless there's a government legislation which asks for monitoring traffic, you're not supposed to look at which site I'm looking at and how long. That's called purpose limitation. You do with the data what it's supposed to do, not start doing things fancily. Like I go to a bank, I do transactions at different grocery stores, but I have a banking account for the purpose of keeping money and taking money away. If my bank starts looking at where am I transacting and how, I know it may sound, how does it matter? But it does. Then they start to make a profile of me and start to categorize me and send me offers from those providers. No, sorry, that's not done. I didn't give the bank, I didn't make my transactions for bank to check where am I buying or shopping things. Then proportionality, that means it has to be in function of the need. That is, let's say we are installing a security camera at our home. Now, I want to detect movement. I want to protect my house. But if I install a camera which detects temperature of people, is it proportional to the need? Is the security the need or Corona the need? Let the need be clear and let the action be proportionate to that. And the other thing is non-discrimination and fairness. That is, it should do the thing irrespective of whose data it is. So it should be transparent. It should be fair. And here the challenge is usually the data is unfair and the algorithms tend to be unfair. The next thing I like to emphasize is responsibility. So when you are doing these things, take personal responsibility to say, if this project happened with your son, with your daughter, with your wife, with your mother or your sister, would you feel good? So don't do, it's good for my business, let me do it. Look at it, is it good? Is it responsible? And responsibility generally comes when you apply it on yourself and your near ones. And of course, we need to take care of security because you want to make sure there's no data breach, it's adequately encrypted. If needed, it's pseudonymized, and post retention or period, it's anonymized. That's going to be very, very important. And also security of data when it is going across multiple regions or countries. And in today's world, when we look at it, we have the cyberspace or the days of internet. And the question is, do we have the freedom that we are asking? The fact of the matter is, it depends on us. Like most companies would say, create an email. Based on that email, they will give you the access to their maps system, their browser, and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to protect your privacy, how about having two emails? One which you will generously share data, but that will have some different parameters so that it doesn't identify you. And the other one which is used for personal perspective, like your bank accounts and everything, and so that those two elements cannot be linked. That's how you'll protect your freedom in today's world. You have to be smart. I know of some friends who have created dedicated emails, not on Gmail, but on Proton Mail or something like that, or personal emails, on which they do all the subscriptions or newsletters, because they don't want them to be linked to their profile anyhow. That doesn't mean they don't have a Google account or a Gmail account. And in India's case, your government has recently come up with social media rules, very recently. And I will not comment left or right, but I think the government has all the rights to ensure security of people, but the government has also the responsibility to protect the freedom of individuals, because the government cannot only say that it's a security element and we are having the rules, because there are the other 9 principles that need to come in place. And that takes us to the 10th principle, that is accountability. When a government or an organization is implementing these principles, it is about accountability. That is, I'm doing the right thing and I can demonstrate that doing the right thing. It's not snoozing others. It is about ensuring that things are fair, transparent, and it can be demonstrated via tangible evidence. How do you do it in an organizational context? You do it via documentation. That is, you document evidence, each and everything. What do I mean by that? Let's take an example of very primitive example. A company wants to comply with privacy laws, or let's take the example of India's social media act, or whatever you want to call it, that came up 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. It wants a chief grievance officer to be installed. And again, these rules are always like, if these conditions are met. Now let's imagine a company decides we don't need to install a chief grievance officer, or in case of privacy, we say data protection officer. So we say, for these reasons, we believe we don't need to install or have a grievance officer or a protection officer. Now, if you have that reason, document it, write it, make minutes, and have all the rationale for it. Because who knows, 2 years later, somebody sues you, or something goes wrong, or there's a data breach, and you're in the court having, or with the authorities having to defend, why didn't you install a grievance officer or a data protection officer? So if you don't have any proof, that means willful negligence, you didn't pay any attention, then you're liable for fines and penalties. But if you have evidence pertaining to last 3-5 years, how you have been making decisions, how you have been looking at different perspective, how the different elements, like we talked about the 6 perspectives or the 5 A's, have been taken into cognizance, and a company has always acted in a responsible manner. There was check on lawfulness, human control, and all those. And then it decided in their case, for these specific reasons, this didn't apply. Then in the court of law or in normal circumstances, unless somebody has vendetta against you, it will be like, okay, that was a wrong choice on your part. You need to fix it. There may be a fine. I'm not saying there won't be a fine, but the gravity of fine would be lesser because it's not willful negligence. It is wrong decision making, but do you have evidence that how the decision was made? And at that time, all the people on the table have contributed it in a balanced view, not like we decided we will not have chief compliance or chief grievance officer because blah, 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 blah. That's not good. You have to say legal said this, security said this, compliance said this said this. And based on all these opinions, collectively we decided this because of these reasons. And then it doesn't mean now you decide you won't have a grievance officer or privacy and protection officer, you will never have. And then the end is we will review it in 1 year or 2 years, and you keep reviewing it, or also based on certain incidents. Then 2 months later, there happens a data breach. And you struggle to reply because you don't have a data protection officer or a grievance officer. And then you say, okay, let's review that decision. Again, evidence. Again, evidence. And when you have a lot of evidence, you have fulfilled what I call accountability. So now these were the 10 principles. And now let's get to what you should do, because we talked about perspectives, we talked about the 5A approach, we talked about the things not to do and the 10 principles. But what do you do then? How do you do it? What are the elements? What are the steps to do? Because that's also an interesting question. So let's get into a few things that you should do. First and foremost is have a very clear and defined strategy, policy, and framework. That is, what does your company stand for? Now, at this point, some of you would say, well, that's theoretical. There are a lot of breaches happening in the world. On international basis or national basis, we see a lot of snooping, a lot of bypass of these laws. Now, these things have existed ever since the mankind has come to this earth. There are good people and there are bad people. The media, the news show us some isolated incidents in which privacy is getting breached, data is getting breached, and we are aware of it. But there are thousands and tens and thousands and hundreds and thousands or millions of companies who are also protecting. It is like saying, I'm going on a red light, and let's imagine there's a camera and 10 people are flashed, they get fines, and we talk about those 10 people. But there are 10,000 people going through that camera. Now, is the camera there to fine or not? Is it about 10 people or 10,000 people? The camera is there so that those 10,010 people are driving responsibly. Now, while 10 people have been fined or have been breached, or let's call them data breach is there are other 10,000 who complied with the law. And if we didn't have a law, who knows that 10 would have been 1,000 or 10,000 even. So the purpose of law, the purpose of strategy, the purpose of all these conversations is not to look at the sensationalization that the media provides us in terms of breaches or the effects, but also the practicality. What is it serving? Because when we say the laws are, some people say, useless or dead, if we say that, then are we saying we don't need any law? Everything will do by itself? No. Do we not need red lights just because 5% of people jump red lights? We need red lights so that people know when to go and when not to go, and so that traffic becomes smooth. Yes, there are some of us who breach laws, and we need to guide them, we need to educate them. And those who are doing data breaches or national level, there is snooping or those things, we need to put those governments, those organizations to accountability. And how do we do that? That's why there are world level agencies, global agencies, national agencies, which are supposed to give fair and transparent opinion, like how democratic a country is, how much of transparency index is, and those are playing their fair share. We may not like it, we may like it, but that's how the balance would be stuck. So the next thing is exactly that point. Set up a governance, set up different teams. If you're an organization, set up an audit department, set up a AI department, set up a privacy department. Let them converse, let them have good conversations on what should be done and what should not be done. So you create the department, you create the governance. Department meaning a set of people, say privacy department, AI department, legal department, and governance is a committee in which all of them meet and have to discuss on privacy issues, on ethical issues, on AI issues, or other issues. And get your staff trained. Get your staff trained in these departments on what you expect them to do. And more importantly, set aside investments. Investments to give training, to have that staff onboarded, to have that staff be able to participate in governance, and have the ability to define strategy, policy, and framework, because it costs money. It doesn't happen on its own. And with that, you would have created a secure infrastructure and ecosystem, usually. And if you look at this at a country level, we often hear stories, and especially the way it works is in Europe, we will hear about Russia. In India, you'll hear about Pakistan or China. And then in China, they'll hear about US. In US, they'll hear about China. So there are always these stories saying that country is not good, this country is not good, or that, or they are not respecting the law. But everyone has, as I said, a societal and cultural aspect based on which privacy is determined. And it's also determined on the values of the government. I mean, one government may be moderate and the other one may be liberals, and the other one may be somewhere in the middle. And those factors determine how we are evolving or not. Like 140 countries have a privacy law, but what about the other 100? Why don't they have a privacy law? Now, none of the countries yet has a AI regulation. I mean, EU has published its AI regulation recently, but that apart, no one has a formal AI regulation. Everyone has a AI guidelines, AI framework. Why? So there are two factors. One is the intent and the other is the culture. And the third is, of course, the society and everything. So that's how it works. And as you do that, you cannot rely on government, you cannot rely on department. There needs to be a culture of intrapreneurship. So we talk about entrepreneurship, that is, you are independent, you're making things happen, taking control of things and so on. Same thing we need in an organization. And as you do that, you need to encourage open and proactive communication without boundaries. So if you say, like one person in the chat remarked about a government in a country, without picking up any country. If the government is doing it, it's the responsibility of the citizens to openly and proactively criticize. And if the government is preventing that, then it needs to be looked at from a different dimension, because it's not good for the country in the long term, whichever the country is. And as you do that, whether at government level, country level, entrepreneur level, or whichever level, all the investments you are making, they need to be leveraged, and all the efforts you are making need to be leveraged. But the question then is, how do you make sure that leverage is happening? How do you make sure you stay in touch? That's where I call what is outside in perspective. So you don't look and talk to people whom you like and whom you know, and they know as much as you know. You go and discuss with people or get perspectives from outside, like maybe listen to some podcast. Of course, I would say my podcast, but or listen to read some books, or talk to some people, get some training, get some insights, get like Jim's, I mean, is doing right now. You guys are inviting me from Europe, and I'm quite certain that I'm giving you a perspective which is different. And you'll say it's theoretical. Some of you will say it's challenging. Some of you say it's not possible. or you'll say it's in Europe, but end of the day, that's a perspective. So look at different perspectives and try to understand why they exist and what they exist for. And this is also important because your AI, your privacy, your data science keeps adapting and modifying on a daily basis, because every country is passing a law every now and then or making an amendment. So how do you keep track? How do you stay in touch? You need to keep yourself informed, and that's where outside perspectives are relevant. Now, that's why for students like you, most of you are interested in certification courses, and we have those certification courses which most law students love it to get certified. As and Naresh sir said, I help with privacy certifications or IIPP certifications. But in summary, let me help you with 5 key takeaway messages. The first thing is, look at your projects from various perspectives, not one perspective. Second is, inform, engage, and involve key stakeholders. So have as many people as decision makers as possible. In that, decision making will be slow. That's the essence of democratic process. But when there is consensus, the decision quality is higher, meaning more people are satisfied. Then have a list of don't do things, because that helps people know what not to do, certainly. And that's generally a short list. Have a list of always do, and take a principle based approach rather than an approach saying my approach, your approach, this approach, that approach. Like most companies or people, when they come to me, say, which law do we apply? We are in US or we are here. And I usually tell them, tell me your growth plans. We will have a global approach. That is a principle based approach rather than a law based approach. Of course, we want to comply with the law, but in a principle manner rather than in a law manner. Like most students would come to me and say, hey, which certification I go for? And I say, what is your objective? Why do you want to do it? Where do you see yourself 5 years later? Because that will determine what you're going to do rather than what's happening right now currently. And if you take care of cultural governance, communication, and all these things that I've talked about, the technology is relatively the easy part. It will take care of itself. With that, I would say thank you so much for your attention. I'm extremely humbled at having the privilege and an honor to share my thoughts and provide you insights. And I believe and I hope it was useful or at least different for you. And now I would say, let's have some questions. Thank you so much, guys. Maybe I think it's time to look at some questions in the chat, probably, or I don't know if the moderator wants to take control back. So there's a question in the chat saying, as we know, AI and privacy, AI daily adapts and modifies itself. So how does one protect or check that privacy has not been violated? That's a very smart question. And as I said, it's about having smart algorithms and having a principle-based approach. And as you will have that, you will look at things saying, is this violation of this principle? So you'll define rules in your AI, and when one of the rules is violated, you'll send alerts so that corrective action can be taken or the self-learning algorithm can kick in. Yeah, Shanvi, thank you.
Yes, Shanvi, please take next question.
Sir, there is another question, which is like there is some news about Indian government is going to use the same face recognition pattern that the Chinese government uses to keep a track of particular individuals of interest. So, sir, is the technology like this legal, or would it come under the breach of privacy?
It depends on which country we are talking about. At the
Sir,
moment,
if we talk about India.
yeah, if we talk about India, I was trying to steer clear of the political controversy because these days it's easy to get into controversy in some countries. So, India, as of what I understand, has an IT Act and the Social Media Act recently, which came 3 weeks ago. It does not have a full-fledged privacy law. It has been in progress for last 3 years. We know the Personal Data Protection Bill, but it is not. And even if the Personal Data Protection Bill was there, it has that exemption for state that they can carry out these monitoring or surveillance from the perspective of threat to the state. Now, what is a threat to the state or what is not a threat to the state is a very subjective matter. It is based on people who are looking at it, the way state looks at it, and the way emotions are. So it gets slightly outside of the legal dimension because all laws generally have a provision that in certain cases you should get exemption. While practically speaking, the primary aspect has to be focus on the privacy of individual. Everyone has a right for freedom, right to speech, and so on. And then under exceptional circumstances, when proven that those rights are causing an impact on the state, there can be an action like surveillance. So it has to be later on, but that is not usually the case in most countries, especially the developing world.
Thank you, sir. We got our answer, I hope. So another question is our privacy getting exploited many times? Don't you think privacy as a concept has become weaker and weaker? Weber has asked this question.
That's a very common question everywhere. It's very famous with journalists because it's a good article to write and get clicks. So yeah, it's a fair point. That's one viewpoint that exists in the market. And as I said early on, if you look at 1950s and 60s, we were talking about equality and diversity and all those things and equal rights for everyone, irrespective of the color of skin and so on. And we needed to fight a battle against the might of big countries. Now it's the same situation with privacy. We are in the same situation that we were in 1950s, 60s from a human rights perspective. We are in context of privacy rights. And here we are fighting a battle with the big tech because they have collected huge amount of data. And with that data, they have a huge unfair advantage. And it always happens. Technology leads and laws lag because technology does something and then we say, oh, let's set up a law. So in this case, it's no different. Technology has led. Now we have an unfair advantage and we are catching up. But I'm very sure that in time, we will win this battle. How far? Only time will tell. Maybe there'll be a creative solution that the users will be incentivized for their data, that is, they're paid for data, or we are having the situation wherein there's more fairness. But it's going to be a tough battle because in 1950s and 60s, there was no internet. We had to fight people to people. Here we have to find technology and the might of economy. And when money gets involved, it's a difficult battle. But yes, you are right. In a perspective, it's getting weaker, but it'll get stronger together with the laws and our efforts. And believe me, you still have the right not to share your bank account password with me. I gave you the challenge. So you are still in control of your data. You didn't send me any email. Of course, I didn't check my email, but I'm very confident you did not. So you still have some privacy, of course, not as much as you would wish to.
Thank you so much, sir. So there are some more questions. One of the question is, there are web portals like dark web, dark net, black pass, etc., which sell private info of individual. So can the call government of India ban these web portals in India?
If it wants to.
Okay, sir.
I mean, it's always a question of intent.
Like the question is, if people ask to ban these portals, can government ban these?
I mean,
They can.
government can do anything. If the government is powerful, it can do anything. If it has the right intent or the intent, let's not even talk about right intent. If the government has the
Yes.
intent, it can do anything and everything, especially when they have the power. And everywhere it can. The only question is, in a democratic process, how far we can go. And that's where the majority principle comes in. So theoretically speaking, yes. Practically speaking, in a democratic and practical world, there are challenges, but that's why we have these democratic institutions and policies, so that not one person on one team runs away with their agenda. But yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, how will we know if a covert organization is stealing our credentials and data before it's too late?
That's a very smart question. You guys are asking smart and tough questions. I like it because that helps me think. So there are some sites which are available which allow you to search if your data has been breached and how many times it has been breached. Like there's a site MIPond, or sorry, I am pond spawned. So you go there, you give your email and it says, has it been in part of any breaches? Then there's a password check which says, I will not brand those sites for obvious reasons because I'm not paid by them. So I'll just give you the types of sites. Then there is this site which helps you saying, like, I was using a password and it said it's breached 42 times. I said, oh, okay, let's not use this one. So I changed my password. So there are means like that. There's also a company called Say Mine or mine.com. You give your email and it gives you a list of, because I spoke to the owner a few weeks ago, and they give you a list of which all companies have your data. It's amazing. And I was even with my data, I was amazed how come these companies have that data. And the worst part was when I was saying, please delete my data, and they say, can you prove that we have your data? Oh, wow. So the onus is on me to prove, because, and then I need to give my ID card and so on. So the game is very interesting, if I may call it. But regarding your question, very simply, there are ways and means in which, like I said, password data breach check, your email, have you been spawned, or you check Say Mine, and there are many other companies. I don't want to give branding to them unnecessarily, but if you search, there are many sites which allow you to do that.
So now this will be the last question, as we would run out of time then. Sir, as all laws lag in implementation, so does cyber law. So according to you, what steps can be taken for better implementation?
So laws will lag technology, that's always. But if you follow the 6 perspectives, you will be having a very good balance, because you look at ethical, societal, human, and privacy dimension, which is not based on laws, and you will be able to have a good perspective. But finding those people in those dimensions, like a strong ethical person with an integrity and setting a department, somebody knowing human factors, societal aspects, is challenging.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Now I would request Professor Dr. N.K. Behel, sir, to please give a vote of thanks to sir.
Yeah, please. Honorable the Chairman, Dr. Amit Gupta sir, Director Dr. Raghuvanshi sir, Principal Gemtech School of Law Professor Dr. Pallavi Gupta ma'am, our most valued invited guests, coordinating faculty members, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to extend a vote of thanks to Bhatia sir. Therefore, I am Dr. N.K. Behel, Professor of Law, Gemtech School of Law, Greater Noida, and I am here to present the vote of thanks for today's webinar. I would like to thank our guest speaker, Honorable Puneet Bhatia sir, for visiting and enlightening us with his knowledge. Today's webinar was very informative, full of knowledge and interesting things of our life. On my behalf and on behalf of Gemtech fraternity, I extend very warm vote of thanks to Bhatia sir for speaking on a contemporary and rare topic like artificial intelligence and privacy. Sir, our students and faculty members are greatly benefited from today's webinar, in which your good self has explained the concept of privacy vis-a-vis artificial intelligence very nicely, lucidly, and that too in a very simple language. You have guided us how to save ourselves from our inherent privacy risks. Really, sir, you are the fittest person for saving citizens' privacy. You have given us an umbrella perspective of artificial intelligence and privacy. Your good self has spared time out of your busy schedule. We are again thankful to you, sir. My thanks to Principal Gemtech School of Law, Dr. Pallavi Gupta ma'am also, and Faculty Coordinator, Mrs. Prabha Sen ma'am, Assistant Professor of Law. And also my thanks to student coordinators, dear Varun Warrior, Dipanshi, and Chaitanya Singh Gehlawat, along with moderator Shanvi Tyagi. Thank you so much, Puneet Bhatia sir, once again. Over to moderator Shanvi, please.
Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable words. And thank you to as well, Mr. Puneet, sir, for your wisdom and knowledge. Now I would request everyone to please switch on their camera so that we can take a group photograph of this webinar.
Thank you so much. And you have my consent to publish it on social media.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Ma'am, are we ready for the photograph? Prabha, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you so much, sir.
much,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.